Hey, how's it going? Thanks for sending in your new version here, so let's take a look at it. Nice. Whoosh. Yeah, it's feeling super cool, super badass. One of the bigger notes I have and what I'm going to do first and why I don't have notes on the thing sketch yet is because I want to do a quick camera cleanup pass and show you me doing it. I think that's going to be super useful, hopefully. There's a few areas in which the focus point kind of shifts and it kind of feels a bit off. I'll show you what I mean. There's this tool in Maya that I turn on sometimes. It's like a ruler. Field chart. It's called the field chart. Okay. So what you can do with this is you can see areas like this. So this set of frames through here, you can see that we're kind of focused in the middle of them during this. And then we kind of slide over, like the focus point kind of changes. We do end up a better composition here. So I do think maybe the solution to this is during this swipe. It'll probably be the rotate Y. So during this character's swipe in here, we did have a camera shake layer. Okay, I won't look at that for now. Maybe during something in here with this swiping, we can come over a bit, all right? And then now when we pivot here, maybe we can keep this over a little bit. I'm just fiddling with it. See, with this field chart on, I can kind of see where the pivot point is. And that feels a bit more controlled now. It's a little slight adjustment. So I think maybe through these frames. So we land here, we have this cool contact, and the pivot point is kind of central between the two of them. But then between here and here, maybe we're getting a bit far away from them. Maybe I'll drag it back. Not sure if this is camera shake or what this is, or if this is intentional. Maybe this is some intentional framing stuff you've done, so I won't delete it. So as he steps away here, and then we come around. So it might look a bit messy in here, but if it works, it works. You know, we're just making sure that the focus point feels okay. Here, maybe during this pivot, maybe it gets a little bit stuck. Can't tell so much. It feels okay, so I'm going to leave it for now. And we'll look through some of this. We don't always need the exact point that we're looking at to be exactly central, you know, like here. Although maybe we can adjust it and see. We can try it out. So by this kind of keyframe here, I'll get to this and I can frame this up a little bit. Keep them more central. This is all looking good. And then they kind of pull away here. I'm going to set a key. When they pull away, maybe something in here we can push a little bit. See. So we kind of follow our main guy here. Maybe this is a bit too fast, so I'll do it 2 frames later. We're mostly centralized on them through this section, apart from here. So maybe during this part, from about here onwards, I'm going to tone this down a bit. So I'm really just babying this curve. And maybe this, if this went the opposite way and centralized them a bit more during this part, eased out even a little bit. Here we can see we're really getting away from them. So I'm going to push to keep them more in frame. Cool. And then I think the ending's okay. Cool. So that's the cleanup of the rotate Y there. It's a little bit noisy, but I think that's okay. I think it's mostly just about keeping the focus and the composition interesting by keeping them mostly on different sides of the central point. Cool. And then the second thing, I think what would be cool is maybe if we could be a bit closer to them for certain sections. So I'm going to look at the curves here. Let me switch to perspective. So camera. So for a lot of it around here, it's mostly going to be the translate Z here. So let's go back to the camera and look at the translate Z. And then what we can do is make sure that for a lot of these sections, so I think probably the start's okay. Boom. Maybe we could be a bit closer to them. Okay, so this axis isn't doing exactly what I want it to. I wonder if there's another space I could put this in, which would allow this axis to do what I want. I could definitely use Animbot, but I'm trying not to because I know you don't have Animbot, and you won't be able to replicate what I do. So maybe it's just a mixture of these two axes through from this part for this section. It's kind of difficult to manage both axes at once. So let's just look at the Z for now and maybe counter. Maybe we just don't need to come as far back for some of these frames. We get rid of some of these in-betweens and we kind of get a bit closer in here. Now our rotate Y is off, I guess. That's probably what's happening. I'll just clean up some of this a little bit. So our rotate Y that we just cleaned up has now been changed by, well, our kind of main focus point has been changed for that section, but we feel a bit closer, which is nice. So maybe we can now compensate with the translate X. So ideally I would switch the space of this. So let's turn this ruler back on. And for this kind of section, maybe if we were over a bit. Cool, it's feeling pretty good. Here we have like this double movement. I think maybe if we just clean that up. Yeah, that feels a little bit better. So we're just a bit closer for this kind of action-y sequence part in here, which I think would feel cool. And then maybe here, when we come back around to this side, maybe we're getting a bit too far away. So let's... Now this is left and right, and this is probably forward and back, right? Yeah. So maybe from here through here, maybe we can scale this down a bit, keep us a bit closer to them, clean up this curve a bit. So I'm just deleting some keys. And now we're probably gonna have to compensate a bunch. If we stay, oh, okay. The axes are getting very awkward through this section. So with Animbot, I could change this pretty easily, but I'm not going to. Still feeling okay. I just think you want to get some contrast here. I think we want to be close up until this point, and then when you slash, we can pull out for this, and then we go for the second slash, we pull in again, right? I think that's like the cool, more anime-esque camera. I think that's going to be feeling a bit better. Still some jank in here, which needs some cleaning during this transition. It's not this. It's probably some... rotate. Oftentimes I end up just deleting keys and simplifying. I don't think it's to do with this really though. Maybe that's too much. Just I think it's mostly to do with the rotation. Maybe it's coming in a bit late. No, it's definitely not. What you had was working good. Maybe it's some of this in here could be cleaned up a little bit. It's fine to have a little bit of noise in there, as long as it's relatively clean. Sure, we could keep cleaning that up if we wanted to. So cool, for here, I definitely want to be closer for that section. Sadly though, the object here isn't showing us what the axes are actually doing. You have to go to axes, live rotation axes, and then this is your issue, right? It's really hard to zoom in closer to them because it's literally both of these axes. So we might be able to do it if we select both of the axes. Let's go to the camera. And sometimes it's hard to do, like once you've got all of this difficult stuff. So let's say we're happy with up to this point, up to say this point, we're happy with how close we're zoomed in. I'm just going to add a layer. And I'm going to set a key on that point. This is a zeroed out key. This is what we wanted. And then I think we want to be closer right up until about here. And then during this slash, we can pull out to what you've got, right? So I'm going to go into the X and Z axes for this point, and I'm just going to push this in. We might have to be way further out. So now I can control that zoom, right? And here, maybe we want this to be a bit more linear as it starts. So we're getting closer. And then we can come back out to what we have after this slash, right? Things are definitely a bit muddled. Like our focus goes over to the right and then the left again. So somewhere in here, maybe I'll do a quick minor adjustment. So yeah, that cleaned that up a little bit. So it's kind of straighter. Cool, so let's look at that. And then what I'd do is I would smart bake that back down. So it's one layer again. Cool, and then we come in again for that final framing. So we're a bit closer for a lot of this. I think maybe in here we've got a lot of negative space on the left side. So let's first, I'm going to save a new version of this. So let's go 0702. And then what I'm going to do is select the camera. I'm going to bake this. I'm going to right click on the merge layers and I'm going to smart bake. So we don't add a frame on everything. We just try and bake down onto the frames we've already got. That way it keeps it a bit cleaner. Sometimes it can get super messy if you don't do that. So now it's all back on this one layer, this camera stuff. And we can look at the rotate Y because that was never an issue. And we can look at from around here. I think we just want to be a bit further. Yeah, so let's turn this guy on, this guide again. And let's maybe just push it a little bit. So here, this guy's coming up to about the 5. And this guy's just around the 5 as well. So that's probably okay. Whereas here, we're kind of getting a bit lost. So let's make sure we're a bit further over. And then around here, I think we're kind of losing them. It's not too bad. So he steps in. So maybe as he's stepping in, we can come over a little bit. Cool, so let's look at this. Cool, so we're just a bit closer to the action throughout the whole thing, which feels pretty cool. I'm liking that. Just feels a bit more intentional, the cameras. We're not just like widely away from them. I think that's going to help. Maybe what we can do for this ending, if we want to be super fancy, we can try something out. I'm going to show you a little trick that I like to do for punctuating things. It's called a zolly, which is a zoom dolly. It's where it's sometimes referred to as a vertigo effect. It's where you use both the tracking in of the camera and the focal length at the same time to get a certain feeling. So I'm probably going to just, on this layer, go here and then go here where we're in. So, you know, by about here. I'm going to ignore all those other layers, all those other keys, because all that matters is these 2 keys. If I go into here, we'll be able to see them. Cool, it's just these 2 is all that we care about. So if we go in even closer, so maybe I'll do this manually on this layer. Just going to go in a shit ton. So we're way too close now, obviously. Layer translates. And let's snap into it. Maybe we could be even quicker. Do it over like couple frames. So we're too close now, but during this transition, what we can do is if we keep the focal length here, looks like it's already kind of happening actually, which is pretty sweet. But maybe we're going, if we want to go wider with it instead of narrower. So is the focal length part of the layer? Doesn't necessarily look like it, does it? So it's between this frame and this frame. So if we get wider, just just going to have to do a lot of back and forth on this, I think. And then this can be more linear into it. Cool. So now it's going to be a balance of going back and forth. I'm going to go into these, zoom in more. Awesome. And then in this, scale this up more. And maybe we'll do a bit of adjustment as well during this transition. So let's make sure all of these other attributes end on the same frame. So we all end on the same frame here. Nice. And then maybe we can get a bit of this involved. And again, we're kind of getting quickly into that. Cool. Obviously, I don't want to lose that sword composition. So maybe what I'll try is a little bit of tilt. Oh, the Z is doing what the X is doing, which is not great. Let's look at the gimbal. Yeah, so the gimbal's completely busted here, which is not ideal. So I'm just going to use this layer to help me with it. So we're going to be rotating. Oops, look at the camera. Whoops, camera. All right. Am I on the wrong thing? Okay, I was. This camera. That's not perspective. This is perspective. Okay, cool. So I want to tilt this way. Cool. And now the tilt's kind of messy because, of course it is. Everything's going to be messy because of the gimbal issues we're having. So now we're going to have to rotate over a bit. Ideally, what I would do is I'd have both the perspective and this open, and I would try and find a cool framing and use this layer to get around that gimbal just by using all the object stuff. So maybe this is a bit much. But because it's all on this one layer, what we can do is we can play with the weight here. And we can find a framing that actually works, like around here maybe, or... I like having the silhouette visible, so maybe we'll turn this down a bit more. Maybe we'll go to like here. Okay, so the sword is at its widest about here. So let's just go on this. This is about where the sword is the widest, so let's just do it to here maybe. So we get a little bit of that feeling. So I did it a bit bigger, and now I've toned it down using the layer. Cool. Awesome. Cool. So let's have a look at what we've got here. Still maybe a couple polishy things that we'll try out. But that little focal length change in there makes this cool like warping effect as we zoom in, which feels super punchy and nice. So I'll keep this as a layer for now. We'll just call this like final Zolly. I don't mind having lots of layers as long as they're labeled so I know what's going on. I think there was a couple of things at the start here where maybe we're a bit unbalanced in our composition. Like here, he's touching the number 5, but he's only touching like 3 on this side, you know? So I don't mind having it a bit off, but let's bring back up the graph editor here. Let's look at rotation Y. Rotation Y shouldn't be messed up. So I'm just going to clean. This is fine, but maybe we want to be a little bit more this way for this. Some of this section a little bit less. We'll just see. Especially here. Be a bit further over. Cool. A little polishy, definitely. But hopefully some of these camera things really punch up what we've got. And then what we can do as well is play around with some of your camera shakes here. I think what you got is feeling pretty good. maybe I would tone down this ending. So if I select all your curves here, and I look at this final, all this final stuff, scale this back a little bit. I think maybe it was doing a bit too much. I like it pulling out a little bit, but maybe it was too much. Maybe I'll scale it down a little bit again. So we just have a slight drift out at the end. We don't need as much as you had. I have a hotkey which just scales 15% back to the left key. Another Animbot hotkey which I have. Cool, that's feeling pretty good to me. So now I think one more camera thing we can do at this stage, which is again another layer. Lots of layers. And I'll save before I do this, and I'll do it on a layer so you can see it. We'll call this one Cam Handheld. So to give it a little bit of ambience, so things aren't CG and a little bit dirtied up, what I like to do is I'll just set a key on a fresh layer at the start and the end. I actually use Animbot for this, but I'll try not to. So let's just try add a load of keys at random places. This is not usually the method I use. I usually use Animbot. It has a noise function. So let's just play around with some of these curves. I'm just going to like mess up a bunch of stuff, make sure that we're messy and this kind of stuff. So I'm not being super clean with it. I'm just keeping it messy, and we'll see how this works out. This is not usually the method I use, but if I scale this up a bunch now, a whole bunch, we can always turn the mute layer on and off just to see how much this is affecting things. So as you can see, we're getting a little bit of wobble throughout the whole thing. Scale it up so you can see it a bunch. Cool, and maybe it's not high frequency enough, like we don't have enough keys here. So what I'll do is I'll select all of this, and I will, it starts and ends on 0 here, so I can copy it. Well, I'm gonna scale it down. Let's just do like halfway, and then snap it. Right, and then I'm gonna copy it, and I'm gonna go to the last frame, and I'm gonna paste, and my paste settings are a bit different by default, so I'm just gonna switch this to current, because that's what I want. So now it happens twice. So it's a higher frequency wobble. And maybe some of this side to side and stuff is a bit much. Let's have a look. Let's just see what this is doing, for example. So is that this? Somewhat. So I'm just going to scale it down a bunch now. And then we'll see how messy this has made it. A little bit of noise to the camera is effectively what we were adding. Cool, so this is something you can try out. Doesn't necessarily always work, but can add some noise. The version I use, which is with Animbot, is a bit more consistent than this kind of stuff. What we can also do is make sure that these don't overlap by offsetting them from each other a little bit. So all the apexes of X, Y, and Z are a little bit different to each other. So let's try that. So it just gives it a little bit of wobble and noise to everything, so that it feels like there's a bit of a cameraman there, and that's just going to make it feel a little bit more organic, which feels pretty cool. So I'm going to play blast this, and we'll have a look at it in Sync Sketch. Cool, so we're back in Sync Sketch here. So I'm going to play these back to back. Okay, sequence play back isn't available, don't worry. So I'm going to play this one first. This is the before, all of those adjustments. Also, you need to hide whatever this cube is. By the way. So this is the before. It's working. I think it could just be cleaned up and pushed a bit more, and that's what we've tried to do. So let's look at the pushed version. So we've just kept our main guys a bit more focused throughout, and we pushed a few things, especially this kind of zoom ending thing. Sweet, yeah. So I think that's feeling better for sure. So once you get a new version with this kind of camera, right, where things are cleaned up a bit more, and you can follow the steps that I did in this video, then we can use this as more of a final camera. There's a moment let's look at the camera, and maybe I'll give you notes that you can think about when you're doing your version. I think there's a little bit in here where it kind of escapes us, but I think it's mostly okay. I think the camera is actually pretty cool here, so I would go for something like this. And then from there, it's we can kind of polish to this camera more and more. So yeah, from there, there's definitely some feet polish that we can do, some weight stuff. But most of the anim here is really solid. It's looking really great. So yeah, if you get this camera pushing the dynamic stuff that you've got going on here, then we're gonna really be in more polished territory then, like really polished territory at that point. But it's feeling great. It's great work, and yeah, looking forward to seeing you have a go at this camera stuff, and hopefully this demo was useful for you. All right, see you next time. Thanks, dude.